This week on Nerds Without Pants, episode 10, we get all Halloweeny on you. That was the ghost of Patrick Kijak. I am your host for today, for this episode, Robert Otone, and with us, with Patrick and I, is the devilishly handsome, looks good in a black cat outfit, Julian Titus.
What are you talking about? Aren't you Maria?
Oh, no. Oh, I'm sad now. I'm just kidding. That's from Silent Hill 2, everybody, which is arguably the best video game ever made. But this week we're going to be talking about horror, literature, a little bit of film probably. We talked a lot about film last week, or at our last episode rather. So we're going to try to maybe not just touch on it lightly. But the idea of horror is that it's all very subjective. So what scares Patrick might not scare Julian, and what scares Julian might not scare me. What scares me might not scare anybody. So we're going to really be delving a little deeper into what scares us as people and what scares us in terms of gaming. I know we've got a lot of interesting things to talk about here. Horror is my wheelhouse. I grew up with horror. I saw the 1-2 punch of Jaws and Godzilla 1989 when I was like 4 or 5 years old. 5 years old, I guess. And that sort of solidified my love of horror because even though people probably don't want to admit it, Jaws is a horror movie. So, would you agree, Patrick?
Yeah, like my dad tells me stories about that when he went to see the first Jaws in theaters and he brought his cousin and his cousin had nightmares for weeks because of it and he couldn't get over it and wouldn't forgive my dad for a couple months.
Yeah, I saw it for the first time just about a year ago and it was highly effective as a horror movie. It holds up.
Well, as a person who lives on an island, I can tell you that, a lot of people are still very not going in the water, not going to do it, not happening. I'm one of those people. I don't go in the water at the beach. I don't believe in it. I don't like the idea of a shark tearing me to pieces. So
I don't believe in the water.
What's that?
I don't believe in the water.
I don't believe in the water. But yeah, I grew up watching horror. I grew up reading horror, and when there were games out that utilized horror, I was anxious to play them. So, that's sort of how I developed it. Halloween is very big in my household. It's our favorite holiday here. It's my favorite. I don't give a shit about Christmas. I don't care about Thanksgiving that much. I do like to eat, but I don't care about those other things. I love the fall in general. It's just a certain feeling that's in my bones when it's, here in the Northeast, it's particularly beautiful when the leaves, the foliage and everything, and you just snuggle up and drink some apple cider, that kind of thing. So I love the fall. I love Halloween. And Halloween is the only day of the year where you could be another person and not be looked at as a psychopath. So I'm good with that.
Well, also, if you go to Ren Fair, you can do that there, too.
Yeah, but at a Ren Fair, you have to be a knight or a mage or something lame like that. You can't be oh, I'm going to be, a monster, or I'm going to be Speed Racer.
I have seen Master Chief and Boba Fett and, Jason all at the same Ren Fair.
It's more like a cosplay fest.
Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, because usually you'll see that when you go to the Halloween Ren Fair, because then it's all bets are off.
I've been to a Ren Fair in my entire life. I've been to festivals and stuff where people dress as knights or whatever, and I'm that always looks like the most uncomfortable shit that you could ever possibly wear.
Yeah,
but
busty wenches, Rob.
Busty, and it's all pushed up. It's not, when you take all that shit off, they're just gonna drop and they're gonna be down by their knees. So I don't go crazy. I don't go crazy. Most of those busty wenches. I do. No, they are fun to look at. But yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about horror and how horror connects to us as gamers and as discerning fans of the genre. And Julian has an interesting perspective on one of his fears, which is really, really interesting. And we've all got something to bring to the table today, so it's a chock full of show, if you will. But we're going to kick things off with what we've been playing here on Nerds Without Pants. So, Julian, what have you been playing?
I've been playing a couple things, but the main one that I've been playing for review that I wanted to talk about is actually the first free-to-play game for Xbox Live Arcade. It's called Happy Wars.
Oh, I've been playing that too. That's the one, yeah.
We need to get together then, if we can, because I'm actually delaying my review because since the game launched, it's been nigh impossible to get into games.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you just kind of sit in the lobby, and it takes, you just sit there and sit there and sit there, nothing connects, and then people start slowly dropping out, so it starts the whole process over again. And then you sit there and sit there and sit there, and then eventually, the host leaves the lobby, and then you got to start from square one. When you can get into a game, it's actually a lot of fun. For those of you that don't know, it's kind of like a MOBA Lite. It's kind of like a League of Legends style game, multiplayer online battle arena, as they like to be called. You have 3 different classes, warrior, cleric, and mage, and you can switch between them at, anytime that you respawn. And it's basically like a capture point game. You're going from your base and trying to take over the other team's base, and as you go across the map, you're capturing towers that allow you to respawn further along the battlefield. It's very teamwork heavy, which is both a blessing and a curse. I do not like playing with random people on Xbox Live. I don't use my headset, so not a lot of communication going on, but Happy Wars does this really nice thing. It kind of takes a cue from Japanese game design, where you can actually communicate quite a lot just with button presses and things like that. So you can kind of say when you need to be healed or when you want somebody to come with you. And also, there's these team attacks, and you just hit the Y button to initiate them, and it kind of sends this message out, and people have to come up and join in the team of attack with you, and once enough people join, you can launch it, and then, you get all sorts of different effects depending on what class you're playing and what move you're using. But it's really charming. It's got a really nice graphical style to it. It's really cute, and I really enjoy that. I usually don't like these really aggressive, competitive games, but when everything's so, fluffy and adorable, it kind of takes the edge off, and it just makes it a lot more fun to play. So I'm having a good time with it, but like I said, I'm withholding the review right now because I'm waiting for them to address these connection problems.
I haven't had any of those connection problems at all. Yeah, not at all. I've been able to jump right into a game with very little problem. The very first time I played it, I had that issue where people were dropping out and it bounced me back or whatever. But since then, I haven't had any trouble at all. But I do like the game. I feel sort of remiss that I'm not gonna give it the highest score I can because there's certain things that it's lacking that I think would improve it. But at the same time, I do enjoy it. I really, really love the art style. I was very excited about this game going into it because it's their first free-to-play MOBA, like you said. And but at the same time, I feel like the learning curve is a little steep. I feel like people have invested a lot of money in their characters already. So for a neophyte, it's going to be very difficult without you spending a lot of money to kind of catch up in terms of development.
I'm not too happy with the implementation of the pay element.
Yeah.
I understand you got to make your money, but I was kind of hoping it would be more cosmetic and less actual game changing.
Yeah.
And there's also a weird kind of quasi-gambling element to it that I'm not too keen on. Going back to our Vices episode.
Yeah, I agree. And the gambling element is, I stupidly gambled in the game, and I couldn't even get any kills afterwards. It was increase your damage for, a minute or something. Or no, for the next life, increase your damage. And as soon as I respawned, I was dead. Because someone, unloaded on me. So I totally wasted it. It was a little frustrating. So I don't know that my review will probably be up this week on Chud. But yeah, I was not a huge fan of Happy Wars after being excited about it. But the art style is very charming. The music is a lot of fun, and the little characters, they each seem to have a little bit of personality to them, which is nice. So Yeah, Happy Wars is kind of a bummer for me.
Yeah, I need to get some more multiplayer games in there before I can really say I've liked what I've played so far, but definitely stuff like the way that they've implemented the pay options bug me, and then like there are times when I'll just get one shotted and have no idea why that happens,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, oh, okay, well I guess I'll respawn.
We can arrange a multiplayer session.
Yeah, we need to do that. It
That'd
might
be
actually
cool.
be a lot more fun with somebody where I'm just like, okay, we're going over here, we're doing this.
Yeah. What do you play as?
Mainly warrior. I'm always a melee guy when it comes to RPG type stuff.
Yeah, me too. All right. Yeah, I'll try out the cleric though, so we can get like a little bit of a different perspective, because the cleric interested me the most.
Yeah, cleric's pretty fun because you're not just stuck on healing. You're also building a lot of the beneficial items and weapons for the team.
Yeah, the battering ram, which seems to take forever to take down a door. Yeah, but Happy Wars, yeah, that'll be fun to play for sure.
Is that an exclusive?
I feel like it might be, yeah.
Pretty sure it is.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it, so I was like, no PS3, I don't think.
I think you might like it, Patrick, but it's pretty cool. But Patrick, what have you been playing?
Yeah, I guess I'll never know because I don't have an Xbox, and I'm probably not gonna get one. Although I do have the chance now. I was playing FIFA over the last week, and strangely, all of a sudden, my whole system crashed. I couldn't do I couldn't pause it. I couldn't turn it off even. It started chugging, and then just shut off completely. I tried to turn it back on, and I found out, like, with a red blinking light of death, that I had a broken system. Well, yeah.
That's sad.
Oh, it lasted 6 years, guys. It was a good system.
I'm going to say right now, I believe that we should all take a moment of silence for Patrick's PS3. Okay, that's enough.
We should have taps play for it at the end. That's really a bummer, but now's your chance to get an Xbox so you can play games with me and Julian.
Yeah, but I have too many games that I already bought. And
Yeah, but it's hard to switch this far into a generation, unless you just want to like get rid of your entire library and start over.
You could, if he traded in all of his games, he could probably get an Xbox for free at this point with GameStop.
Yeah, but is that worth it after 6 years of collecting them? I think I'm just going to keep them for, if I ever have a kid and he wants to see where I came from.
And they'll be like, Dad, is this your broken PS3? And you'll be like, yeah.
You can fix it for $100, but there's no telling whether or not you'll get it back.
But Patrick, I can really feel your pain. It's kind of funny. I went through 3 PS1s because the PlayStation 1 was a shoddy piece of crap. I mean, that's just a given. I mean, everybody can agree with that. Even people who are big PlayStation fans can agree with that. I went through 3 PlayStation 2s because the PlayStation 2 was also a shoddy piece of crap, but I loved it. And I was like, so when this generation came out, I said, I'm not buying a PS3 anytime after launch because I've been burned twice. So I bought an Xbox 360, about 2 months after launch, and I'm on my 3rd Xbox 360. So I am just bad luck when it comes to consoles since we moved over from cartridges to disc. And Nintendo products are the only ones that I feel confident now buying near launch. But even then, like I've already said, I'm not going to be getting a Wii U. But that bums me out because I want to do the big launch craziness. But there's no way I'm buying a PS4 or a new Xbox on launch day because I just don't trust either of them.
I never had to replace my original Xbox. That thing was built for nuclear war, it felt like. But yeah, I've had to replace my 360 twice, I think? Yeah, twice. My PS1 I had to replace once also, so I had 2 of those. I skipped PS2. But I feel your pain. It's a bummer when systems go, especially when you're in deep like you were with FIFA or whatever.
Skip PS2 though, that was classic.
You know what? I wasn't really into games at that time. I had a Dreamcast and I had my N64 to see me through. So
Dreamcast is pretty cool.
yeah, Dreamcast is awesome. We're big Dreamcast people at Chud, which is weird. Like, you wouldn't think that, like, there would be such a heavy group of Dreamcast fans all working at one site, but there we are.
Yeah, it's wicked hardcore.
Oh, I like it.
Do you have like all the really expensive games that came out for it, like Panzer Dragoon Orta? That's like my favorite.
I have a few of the really expensive games that came out for it. I don't have Panzer Dragoon Orta. Oh no, you know what? I used to, and then I sold it because I'm an idiot. But yeah, I don't have that anymore. But I have a few of the other ones. Some of the other ones that have gotten expensive. I have one of the Fatal Fury games that's gotten pretty pricey. So pretty happy. Pretty happy with my Dreamcast collection.
But wait, but Orta was a Xbox game.
Wait, Saga.
Oh,
Yeah.
And Saga was Saturn.
Yeah.
I actually.
What's the one on the Dreamcast?
Yeah, which one?
There wasn't a Panzer Dragoon on the Dreamcast, unless they may have re-released 2 in Japan.
What am I thinking?
Well, I played it in Sears, I thought.
Yeah, I actually owned Panzer Dragoon Saga, like, back when it came out, and then I traded it in after I beat it.
Nope, it's Orta. Orta is for the Dreamcast. Wait, no, it's Xbox. Soundtrack was on the Dreamcast. What?
I like your reaction. What?
Okay, edit this out, please.
But I've been playing. Chud does our gaming club, and I've been able to participate in this one pretty heavily. We've been doing Costume Quest. I finally finished Costume Quest. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a Charlie Brown Halloween special come to life, sort of, in video game form. And it's excellent. So everybody needs to play Costume Quest if you haven't already. But I've also been playing 007 Legends for the 360. I picked that up, and it's Call of Duty with Daniel Craig, which is fine by me. The multiplayer has some issues, but other than that, it's a pretty solid Call of Duty wannabe from Activision and Eurocom. But the big one is late last night at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I finally finished XCOM.
How many hours did you pump into that? All said and done.
Probably about 21 or 22.
Oh, that's not bad. Okay.
No, not bad at all, right? Weird.
Mm-hmm.
So other people have invested like 48 hours into it. I'm like, I have no idea how you did that, but whatever. And, I researched everything I could. I built every facility I could. I had one of every single item you could build. I upgraded everything. And the most interesting part of the whole thing is if you capture a certain enemy, the aliens use psi powers, like psychic abilities and stuff. If you capture them instead of kill them all the time, I was able to run in with a character and he would stun them. So then you take them back to the XCOM base and you interrogate them, and then you get to perform the autopsies to see how their bodies work after. Otherwise, you just get to do an autopsy and you get a lesser bonus, but if you interrogate them, you get like the full power of what they can give you. So I interrogated I believe it was the Ethereal, which is one of the final enemies that you face. And the Ethereal uses very powerful psychic abilities. So I interrogated this guy, and I was able to build a psi lab in my base. I was like, oh, well, this is pretty cool. What is this? So I build the psi lab, and all of a sudden I'm able to test my soldiers for psychic abilities and psionic powers and stuff. So I was like, oh my god, I'm going to have like an army of Charles Xaviers on my hands. So this is going to be sick. So I'm submitting all my guys, and they're coming back like, nope, no powers, no powers, no powers, no powers, no powers. I was like, shit, what's the problem here? So finally I submit a group of 3, my last group of 3 people, and the reason I waited to submit these 3 is because I kept using one of them in particular on missions because he was my favorite guy. And I named him Toll Road after Randy Couture's character in The Expendables because he was bald and looked like Randy Couture. So he was Major Toll Road. I submitted him and Major Mark Drake from Aliens, along with Major Shijumi from Starship Troopers. And they all came back, and all of a sudden it went Achievement Unlocked, and it went to the Psi Labs, and it turned out Toll Road had psychic abilities. So I had a badass psychic Charles Xavier type warrior on my team, and the key to the end game is having a badass psychic warrior on your team. Like, you need one to get to the final levels, and very engaging. That final battle and that final attack on the alien mothership was really intense. So, emotional investment was at a high for me. I only lost 3 soldiers the entire game.
Oh, that's impressive.
Thanks. I'm pretty happy about it. I lost Carmen Ibanez on her first mission, and I was happy because I hate Carmen Ibanez from the Starship Troopers movie. I have nothing against her in the story. But I also lost Eugene Doc Rowe from Band of Brothers. He was my medic. I lost him in a fight. And I lost, right at the beginning of the game, you lose a soldier, like, automatically, and I lost him. So. Pretty much a bummer, but really, really happy with XCOM. Definitely in my top 5 for the year. And it just seemed to get better and better and better. And even the little missions where you would, splash a small ship, just awesome. So everybody buy XCOM.
How's the story and replayability?
Oh my God, very high. Very high in both regards. The story's great. Like, it's very scientific and very real, it feels. So it's so good. The tentpole missions are great, but the little things that happen in between are even better.
So, Rob, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
When you're doing the alien autopsies, is Jonathan Frakes narrating?
I wish.
No? Okay, 3 out of 5 stars. Missed opportunity.
If number 1's not narrating, it's Dr. Valen, your science officer chick. She narrates the autopsy, and the way they do it, they show the alien like sprawled out on the table, and if it's an organic enemy, when they cut into it, like ooze and blood comes out, like oozes down the table. It's really cool. I was looking at the credits to the game, and they thank Ken Levine for some reason, and they thank Notch. And they think someone else, some other big game development person, and I really wish I had paid closer attention, but I didn't. I just noticed those 2 because it was like 3 o'clock in the morning.
I was working in the lab late one night when my eyes beheld an eerie sight. For my monster from his slab began to rise, and suddenly, to my surprise,
He did the mash.
he did the monster mash.
The monster mash.
It was a graveyard smash.
He did the mash.
It caught on in a flash.
He did the mash.
He did the monster mash. From my laboratory in the castle east to the master bedroom where the vampires feast. The ghouls all came from their humble abodes to get a jolt from my electrode.
They did the mash.
They did the monster mash.
The monster mash.
It was a graveyard
Very good game. And it was very horror, too, which is the key. There's a lot of times where I was just genuinely terrified during XCOM because I had no idea what was around the corner. So I think that goes perfectly into the nature of what we're talking about, the idea of the other, which is really what horror is. That's what we're all genuinely afraid of. This is something John Carpenter, the director of Halloween, often talks about. As a tribe of people, we're always afraid of what's on the periphery, what's on the outside. In the 50s, it was, equal rights. Oh, God, we can't let, people of color vote and stuff like that. And, before that, it was, the internal struggle, like, oh, the Northerners in the South. And so they were the others in that sense. But in reality, they were just us. So what we're really afraid of is ourselves, in a way. But we'll come back to that. In terms of horror, Julian, what are your greatest fears? You've got 2 really, really, really juicy ones.
Yeah, I've got like a really irrational one, and then I've got like a more realistic one. My irrational one, I have this bizarre fear of sea monsters, and that entails anything like in the ocean that can kill you. So I'm talking about great white sharks. I'm talking about giant squid, the Loch Ness monster. Anything like even prehistoric stuff. Like, I'm trying to figure out when this happened to me, and I can't really pinpoint anything in particular. Like, I remember, like, the biblical tale of Jonah and the whale, like, scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. But I think, do either of you remember the movie The Quest?
Yes.
Not the one with Jean-Claude Van Damme, but the one with the kids?
Yeah.
I only saw the Van Damme one.
Okay. Well, The Quest is like, these kids find like this, like, they're going through the woods and stuff, and I guess they find like a really big lake, and it's all, like, you can't really see into it. It's super murky and everything. And this kid, like, on a dare, like, ends up trying to swim in the lake, and all of a sudden gets, like, taken, like, down, into the depths, and you can't, he just disappears. And through the whole movie, you're led to believe that it's some sort of sea monster in there. And it ends up not being that. I won't spoil it, because you should seek out The Quest. It's a really excellent movie. But that terrified the crap out of me. And I don't know, I have this fear of, like, just, like, going into the ocean and just having something from the depths just coming and just taking me away. Either violently or just, like, grabbing onto me and pulling me down. And as far as video games, because this is a video game podcast, Mario 64 actually creeped me out quite a bit. There's those really awesome underwater scenes. And those were great. They were great up until that giant eel popped up. I was just like, this is terrifying. Like, it looks so creepy, for one. But also just because you couldn't actually see it because the draw distance of the Nintendo 64 wasn't very good, and you're underwater to begin with. So it just kind of comes out of nowhere and attacks you. And that just really bothered me. And I don't know if anybody remembers Eco, but Shadow of the Colossus. There is one Colossus that you fight underwater, and it's literally one of those things where you're on the surface of the water, and it's like coming around, and you have to literally like try to attach onto it, and it pulls you under the surface of the water, and you're trying to, simultaneously hold on to it and attack, but also your breathing is a concern in that level. If I remember correctly, I haven't played it since it came out, but it just really terrified me. I just have this real problem with sea creatures, but I'm also fascinated by them. That's the weird thing. Like, I love watching Shark Week. I love anything that has to do with, like, the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
There was this one special on Discovery Channel, like, quite a few years ago, where the premise of the show was that they had gone back in time to, like, the prehistoric days, and they were examining, prehistoric sea creatures. So it was like a deep sea diver was filmed underwater, and then they would digitally put in, like, the sea monster. And it was, like, really fascinating and really interesting, but at the same time I was like, dude, get away from that thing.
There's a lot of really palpable moments in gaming in terms of underwater sea creatures. I like the Mario 64 one. Like I said, I've said this before, I never played Mario 64, but I can imagine that being pretty terrifying. Because the water looks so good in Mario 64 too, which was weird.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing back then.
Yeah. But, you talk about... I'm sorry, Patrick, what was it?
Should be so innocent, but it's not, because of those...
Those are always the toughest levels, though, when you really think about it in Mario, the underwater ones.
Or in any game, friggin' Ninja Turtles 1.
Oh my god, fuck that game. But,
I have like similar fears of, like, underwater, too, except mine most manifested in Shadows of the Empire, the Star Wars game for N64. There's, like, one level where you're playing, it's, like, called Sewers of Imperial City. I'll never forget it, because I was playing it before, like, my school, like in grammar school, and like I wasn't expecting like a scary level, because like the whole rest of the game is just cool action or whatever, but like then you're like in this murky underwater like garbage chute and stuff like that, and you have to like go through pipes, and then you like meet these creepy things, like I found out they're called Dianogas or something like that.
Dianoga, yeah, that's the garbage compactor creature.
Yeah. And man, they're like way scarier when it's like drawn in N64 because it doesn't look as good as like in the movie or whatever. But you're like, what is that? Oh my god! And then like I researched it even further because I don't know. There's something about wading in the water for me, like that, like it could never end. Maybe if you never find the side or whatever, and if you never kill the monster, then like you just have to like keep wading around and keep trying, and like hopefully you don't die, but like that's probably what's gonna happen, and that's like pretty much it's I don't know. It's sort of hopeless in a way, but
the Resident Evil shark goes back to that with the wading in the water because the thing is coming after you so fast and you're moving so slow in that sequence, and it's just terrifying until you can drain in the water and then put a bullet in its head, the baby's heads.
The even creepier thing about the Dianogas, though, is that it comes, I saw, like, it comes from an early name for Jedi. Dianogas or something is an early name for Jedi, and it's like an old etymology in the Star Wars lore, and I'm like, damn, if that's what happens to Jedi when they go bad. Not just the Sith. It's not just the Sith.
Yeah. And, you know, the funny thing for me, again, going to the fascination with, like, underwater stuff, like, I find deep sea exploration far more interesting than space exploration. I'm not too sold on the whole idea of there being like extraterrestrial life, but I mean, even if there is, we still haven't discovered everything under our oceans or in our oceans. And some of that stuff is just so bizarre and freaky. Like I remember when I was a kid, they discovered Megamouth, the whale that uses like it has like a phosphorescent light in its mouth to attract its food. And I was like, that is so terrifying. It's like, you know, you're just like in the darkness and you see this like really like warm, inviting, glowing light. It's like, oh, it's Megamouth.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you know, the Megalodon shark could still be alive deep down in the depths because I think, isn't the idea that the bigger something is, the further down it goes and the older it is? So You never know. I mean, the Humboldt squid gets huge. I texted you that. I didn't hear back from you. The Humboldt squid gets to be like 50 feet long and is supposedly what the Kraken was. So, I mean, these things have taken down ships like on their own. So there are sea monsters. Those are real things.
Yeah. And I'm a full believer of the Loch Ness Monster. I don't know if it's still there, but I do feel that, you know, for a time there were probably multiple creatures living in the loch. And probably elsewhere as well. Like, I think if anything was going to survive, like prehistoric, it would be in the water. Because man hasn't really been able to intrude in there as much as the land.
We're only giving them more, too, with melting the caps. So we could be looking at a whole Waterworld thing one day where there's just a shit ton of sea monsters out there.
Or War of the Worlds where the aliens come up from underneath.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'd be like, listen, I'm in. I'm on your side. I didn't like being a human anyway. Fine.
Probe me.
Probe me. Probe away. Sea monsters are a very real thing. I guess we could all agree. The Humboldt squid exists. Sharks exist. Those are terrifying. Whales are terrifying. But Julian's brought another fear to the table that's really interesting, and it has a lot of connections to stuff like Silent Hill 3, which is one of Julian's favorite games. And Julian's probably the biggest fan of Silent Hill 3 that I know. For very good reason. A lot of people do like it, but Julian seems particularly jazzed about 3. So, Julian, please take the spotlight and take the floor on this one.
Yeah, so, you know, the deep sea thing is totally irrational. I mean, I haven't even been to the ocean since I was like 10. So the odds of me encountering a great white shark or a blue whale or something are pretty small. So it's really just this weird, like, fear that I have. But a more real, more immediate fear that I have is one that I feel is something that I can't escape, and that's the fact of just not amounting to anything and just kind of, for lack of a better word, just being a loser for the rest of my life. And to preface that, I was an honor student in school. I was reading at beyond the 5th grade level when I got to 1st grade. Everything came very easy to me, and school was just a cakewalk, and I got like a very inflated sense of myself and just felt like everything came to me so easily that it was just assumed that I was going to move on to do great things. But resting on my laurels like that, I never really learned how to study, and so when things started to get a little tougher on me, especially with math has never been a strong suit for me, but when things started to get a little tough on me, I just didn't know how to cope. And, I ended up not going to college, and, now I'm in a dead-end job, and it really bothers me. Like, my mom is about to turn 70, and I'm really afraid that she's going to pass on, and she will have died knowing that I was just a disappointment, and not really knowing if my life is going to amount to anything, or if I will be able to, really take care of myself. And it really bothers me, and I would love to go back to school and try to rectify it, but I have messed up with my finances and stuff, and I have so much debt that going to school is not a possibility for me right now, and it's just been this hole that I've been in for the last, 7 or 8 years, and I don't know what I can do to get out of it, and it really concerns and disturbs me.
So are you saying,
Real talk.
Homework was your water, and you never really learned to swim in it?
Well, I didn't have homework. That's the thing. I always finished my stuff in class, and I just thought that I was like all that and everything. But now that I've gotten older and I've started talking to people in other parts of the country, like you gentlemen, I have since learned that the Texas public school system is not a great public school system, for one. And the fact that I was making A's and B's and then C's in math means that I'm really not all that. I'm not nearly as smart as I, was led to believe. I was smart for the Texas public elementary school system, and that's not saying anything really. So I don't know. It kind of this is really weird, and this is a weird geeky tangent. But there's this villain in the X-Men called Gladiator. And basically, he's all-powerful. He's kind of like a Superman type character, but his power is hinged on his faith in his power. So if you can get him to hesitate for a moment in thinking that he is as strong as he is, you can take him down in one punch. And I've seen that happen. Like Cannonball absorbed all the kinetic energy from one of Gladiator's punches. The Gladiator thought would annihilate him, and when Cannonball was still standing, it gave Gladiator just enough hesitation in his own faith in his abilities that Cannonball was able to beat him single-handedly. And that's kind of how I feel. It's like once my confidence in my abilities was called into question, everything just crumbled.
There's a lot of ways that you can look at that in terms of horror and how it could pertain to the idea of fear itself. Like you said, it's all about what you have inside, like you compared to Gladiator, that's like the perfect way. You know what I mean? That's the perfect way to look at it. That, once that's shaken in yourself, it's shaken for good.
Right. And it's one of those things where once it's happened, it feels like I can't right myself again. And it's just, like I'm just constantly on shaky ground and don't know how to correct myself.
There are a lot of games and a lot of media and literature in general that deals with that kind of thing, but not in very good ways often, I find. I don't know if you would agree with that, how much, if you've read a lot of horror literature that relates to that particular fear, like the concept of, who you are being shaken to the core.
No, I'm trying to think, and for some reason, Sublime comes to mind, but I don't remember enough of that movie to know for sure if that's what the takeaway was. It's about a guy who's in a coma, and things are happening to him that kind of change the way he looks at himself, and it doesn't go well for him.
But I think Silent Hill 3 is a good way to connect to that, because the idea of, accepting one's fate and entering adulthood, in the game's case, this is, understanding what the future is and whether or not that's something that they can accept.
Yeah, and the fact that Heather Mason is still a teenager, and really, you get the impression that she has a really good relationship with her father, but at the same time she's still just a teenage girl, and all of us as teenagers were dumb, and the fact that her father's taken from her before he really gets to see what she amounts to, that's a really real thing. I think people who, I'm fortunate that my mom is still around. That's a pretty high age for someone my age. She had me late in life, and the fact that she's still around and still very healthy is a benefit. But, for people who lost their parents really early on before they got to, head into adulthood and stuff like that, that's one of the most real fears that anybody should have.
Yeah.
And it's something we probably take for granted as we're growing up, but, when you encounter somebody who's lost their parents as a kid, that's rough. I can't imagine, living without having my mom at my side all these years, because I don't think I would have made it without her. And arguably I haven't made it.
Yeah, she's still with you, to support and everything.
Yeah,
So
even
that's
if
good.
you don't like your parents very much, they're still good to you in some ways, or they'll be around when you really need them.
Hopefully, yeah. I've been lucky. I got one good one. The other one, can go jump off a bridge.
Jeez. I was watching, and Julian, you'll appreciate this because you're a Heinlein guy too. I was watching Starship Troopers yesterday with a friend, and
I can't appreciate that. I'm sorry.
What's that?
I can't appreciate that. I don't like that movie. But go on.
Oh, come on, you're silly. There's a part where Johnny Rico is, he's enlisted in the mobile infantry, and he washes out basically, and he calls his parents, who basically kick him out when he does sign up. But when he talks to his parents this time, his parents are totally accepting, and they just want him to come back, showing they're still parents. They still do care about him. Even if he did something totally counter to what they wanted and totally against what he believed in, or totally against what they believed in, they still just want him back because he's their son, kind of thing. So it kind of goes along with the idea of, parents, showing up and being strong for their kids. Of course, then they're killed by a bug meteor, but it's okay.
Yeah, I hope my mom isn't killed by a bug meteor.
No, that would be bad.
Yeah.
That would be horrible. In Austin, we would have to rally. We'd go to war. I would be dead. But, the idea of, losing one's parents, when 9/11 happened, up here, there were students in my high school, younger kids than myself. I was a senior at the time, who did lose their parents, or they lost, someone really important. And I remember seeing them in the main lobby area of the school with a lot of, teachers and guidance counselors and stuff around them. They were crying, and I was like, what? And then I put two and two together. I was like, holy shit. And then I found out that one particular student, both of his parents worked in the World Trade Center.
Oh, man. That's
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
Watching it here out in Texas, it was surreal, but I can only imagine, how it was there.
Yeah. Just
like the city here went into lockdown, as far as, well, not lockdown, but there was nobody on the streets when I drove home from work that day. There was nobody out anywhere, and I don't know, it was just a very surreal thing.
Yeah.
that was on my birthday, so I was very affected by it.
Yeah, it pretty much kind of ruins everybody's birthday that was on 9/11.
Yeah, but I was going to the Cubs game and it was canceled. No big deal. On Rescue Me, though, if you watch that, they make a big deal about like the FDNY that was lost in 9/11, and I don't know, when you grow a connection, as you know, Rob, to those characters, it sort of like adds to the whole weight of everything. Yeah. You feel like you knew people who were lost when you see the ghosts of the people who were never in the show but actually are in the show or whatever.
Yeah, when you see Tommy's cousin who's missing a finger because that's the only thing that they found of him in the wreckage or whatever, like, That show does an excellent job of talking about 9/11, better than any other show, I think, that I've seen that takes place in New York. Other shows just use it as an excuse to be like, yeah, this is why we have the tech to go after these criminals, like CSI New York does that.
Yeah. And I thought they were going to do the same thing, like, for this show. I was like, oh, this is just like a trope or something. But, like, no, it's really,
right.
it's what they're really looking into.
Yeah, it's a real thing. The fear in Rescue Me is a good point, too, to talk about. Because terrorism is a fucking scary thing. You could be going to the market one day and then all of a sudden, boom, you blow up because some asshole has dynamite strapped to him or whatever the hell they use. I don't know. So that's a really terrifying thing. So terrorism is horrifying. Probably the biggest form of horror. And I was watching a really amazing documentary. I think it was called Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue. I believe it was on the Chiller channel, but I had actually watched it on Netflix before. And it was talking about, and I think, again, John Carpenter, who's one of my heroes, I think he's the one who made this connection. Who's our boogeyman? And of course he's dead now, but at the time when the documentary was made, Bin Laden was our boogeyman, and like these horror movie villains, he strikes and then he disappears. So the comparison was that, he's the embodiment of like the horror movie bad guy in that sense, like, and that's what we've made him out to be. I just thought it was an interesting point by Johnny C. That's just flat. That's okay. But he's fucking dead now. So whatever.
John Carpenter is dead?
But that's interesting. No, Bin Laden is dead. The day John Carpenter dies is the day that I will weep.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I knew Ben Laden dying, whatever, but like if John Carpenter would have died.
Yeah, who cares about Bin Laden? I'm going to kill him in a video game, for God's sakes.
And you're quite excited about that, it seems.
Yeah.
You know what it is? My most anticipated movie of the year is Zero Dark 30. Or next year, rather, is Zero Dark 30. So the idea of getting to play that in a video game form beforehand is exciting. I don't know. I think the movie looks awesome.
I like the inclusion of the found video footage in Zero Dark 30. The trailer looks like pretty awesome.
Yeah, it does look like a great movie. Moving on to the idea of loneliness and being alone, especially after an event like 9/11 or something like that. As I mentioned, that one student lost both of his parents. Patrick's fear is a one that I think we can all relate to in a lot of ways. So, Patrick, if you will.
I will. Aloneness in games, just when you're playing, you're by yourself a lot, and when you get a particularly moving game, or in some cases harrowing game, that you're just experiencing by your lonesome, it sort of like adds to the ambiance in a lot of ways. I've talked about closure a bit, but that's where it struck me probably the hardest, because I don't know, say everything sort of lined up perfectly for this game. Like, I don't know, is it a point in my life where it wasn't as good as other points in my life, maybe, let's say. And I was, late at night, all the lights off because I was reviewing this game, so I wanted to be as totally immersed in it as I could. And I hadn't felt that scared in a game since, I started playing when I was little in, 4th grade and got my hands on Silent Hill 2 on accident.
But I like the idea of getting your hands accidentally on a video game and then putting it in and playing it.
Yeah, well, we had a sleepover and we tried to rent it, and our parent didn't see that it was rated mature because we had our finger on the sign or whatever. That's the way to do it, kids. Just put your finger on the M.
There's a lot of really awesome games that tackle aloneness as well. Julian, you want to throw one out there?
Well, for me, it's kind of a weird one, but I had probably the most acute sense of being alone when I was playing it, and this goes back to 1994 when, playing it late at night, and that would be Super Metroid, because that's a game where you're completely alone. There's nobody talking to you on a radio. There's no other characters. There's nobody to talk to or interact with. You are Samus Aran. You are, on this planet, and it's just you. And I think especially, the intro is really strong when you go back to the final area where you defeated Mother Brain in the first Metroid, and it's just completely silent. But the parts that I've experienced it the most was when I was really deep into Zeb's, the very, very, very deep parts of the game. And again, going back to the underwater thing, the underwater section of Meridia, a little bit terrifying there, just being just adrift in this submerged area and just feeling like if I get a crack in my suit, like I'm dead, which isn't something that can happen in the game, but it was something that I felt could happen. I just remember playing that late into the nights as a teenager and just feeling very on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because Metroid itself is not a horror game, but it's the investment that you put into it that made it really scary.
Yeah, it's not a horror game, but I will always highlight it as one of the games that has creeped me out the most as a gamer. Super Metroid, even to this day, like I've played that game, multiple times. I've got it practically memorized. It still creeps me out. Like there's just something about the music and the pacing of the game that works together to make it just a nice, pseudo horror game for me.
That and Mario 64, man. That's so funny when you think about two games that are not horror are like terrifying.
And by Nintendo.
You know what adds to it though is the fact that like most gamers like us will play those games completely alone. So like life is imitating art in that sense. So we really feel a connection that way when they're going for something that has to do with solidarity or like just being by yourself or like solitude. It adds to the fact that in real life I'm actually alone, and it makes you sort of think like meta moment. No one's by my side.
That's a really good point because I mean obviously I'm an only child, so I play all of my games alone. But when there's a game where that's kind of a key part of the experience, like I feel it that much more. Like Dead Space is a perfect example of that, where Isaac Clarke is all by himself. And I'm like, I am also all by myself in this dark room with the volume turned up and the lights out. And yeah, I'm kind of feeling you here, Isaac. Like, this is effed up.
Ty keeps offering to come over and finish it for me. So I'm just going to watch him play Dead Space for me because I can't take it. It just terrifies me too goddamn much. But it's interesting talking about, the investment of horror in that case. There are parts that I remember in Earthbound that I was, really scared. There's the kids end up having to face this like world-destroying horror by themselves, and they're not even in their own bodies. Their subconsciouses were transplanted into robotic bodies just so they can go through space and time. And it's a really scary idea because when you really think about it, if they die there, it's ball game over. Like there's nothing is going to get them back home. Their subconsciouses are not just going to leave their robot bodies and go back to, Earth. It's not going to happen. They're going to be lost in time and space forever. So that, I guess we all do that. We all invest a little something too much. Maybe because we are way too into video games. We just invest too much into the games that we play.
Oh, I think you're right on there. I mean, I didn't think about this. Our last episode, our listener wrote in asking about the, what we thought about the potential negative effects of video games. And I do have one that I've experienced in my life that I didn't think of at the time, but it seems weird to me, and I don't know what this says about my life, where I can remember events in video games that I've played in the past clear as day, but things that happened to me personally in my life, it's difficult for me to recollect those. And I don't know if that's because I feel a stronger pull towards my video games than my own boring life, because I grew up so sheltered, or what, but that's a potential negative from video games, at least that I've experienced, where, I can totally tell you, where I was and, what I was doing, the first time that I played Street Fighter 2, or, where I was when Eris died. But, you know, if you ask me even details of, like, the best time of my life when I was working at Game Fellas, like, those things are starting to slip away from me. But I can tell you a lot about the games I was playing when I was working at Game Fellas. Like, I can tell you about that, you know, till the cows come home.
Yeah, well, maybe you're also spending way more time with video games. I mean, not maybe, but like everyone does spend more time with like the things they're indulging in, like what in their private time than they do like with other people. So your mind is waiting like your actual commitment to games that's stronger than your commitment to just social aspects of life, maybe.
Yeah, and I was also, I mean, I just had a really weird upbringing where I didn't really have a social outlet growing up, so, you know, video games were there for me when I didn't really have a lot of other options. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some things to be explored there. This is not the horror podcast, this is the Examine Julian's Messed Up Psyche podcast.
Games will always be there for you. Just give them the 60, no questions asked. Just
right.
I kind of do what you do in terms of the, like, equating certain things to certain things instead of, you know, putting a personal connection to it. When I think of years, for example, I think of movies. Like, years movies came out, you know?
Yeah, I do the same thing with video games, and part of that is working in retail so long, it's like, oh yeah, like, this happened because I remember this came out that year. You know, like for example, and this is really bad, but remembering that 9/11 happened in 2001, it's like, oh yeah, well, I remember Metal Gear Solid 2 came out, you know, because I remember them having to alter the game at the last minute, because there were some events in New York City that were a little too eerie.
It's weird.
It's weird. I don't think, and when I see more recent movies, I always think that the movies are older, because if they came out around 9/11, I don't know if that's a weird thing. You know, I watched something the other day that I was like, oh, this movie's got to be, you know, like 1998, 1997, something like that, and it was like, nope, 2001, and I just couldn't place it. I couldn't remember why I didn't know that, why I didn't remember that. But meanwhile, you you say like, oh, The Exorcist, I'm like 1973, you know, Jaws, 1975. You know, stuff like that is easier for me. Or like Scream, I think was, I want to say 96. I feel like 96. But,
right.
Yeah. And Scream 2, I think was 98. But, yeah, I don't know what it was. I think it was the movie The Faculty came out, I think 2001 or so. And I was just like, no, that had to have been 99. But, yeah, I tried to do a little more research for the horror cast in terms of like, you know, I put all my video games together, all my horror video games together, and I've been trying to go back and play some of them. I started playing the Silent Hill 2 HD game or whatever, and that sort of equates to the aloneness. But I wanted to talk in terms of Patrick's fear there about Condemned, because in Condemned, even though you do have the connection to someone on your smartphone, you're still exploring these pretty terrifying looking areas, and you're really on your own, and your weapons probably won't help you that much because they're going to break, and, you know, guns are not easily found. It's a little bit more of an exploratory game and a little bit more of a horror game than it is about, you know, first-person action in that way. So I found Condemned to be very tense and very jarring at times. But I also found it to be really palpable in terms of the loneliness that this character must feel exploring these locales as a detective.
Yeah, and actually, it being in the first-person perspective, I think, adds to that whole feeling. I mean, the horror definitely, but also the singularity of your character, because you see it all through his perspective, and you know, when you hear something off to the side, you're like, "What was that?" And you have to actually physically look, because you can't just see it in the third-person perspective, where it's like, "Oh, it's this," because I can see it on the edge of the camera, you know.
Yeah.
And,
but
I talked about this on our, well, it hasn't come out yet, but when we do our Backloggers podcast for BioShock. But that's a game that makes me feel alone too, but also I feel bad for the splicers. There's one splicer that, I mean, it's a sound clip you hear a lot when you're exploring Rapture, but it's the one where he's like, I'm just so lonely. I'm so lonely. And it always makes me feel so awful. Because people have been living in these terrible circumstances for years at this point, and they're so messed up in the head, and some of them probably just want to be held, but at the same time they want to murder you because they want your atom. And it's just this awful dichotomy of their personalities.
Mm-hmm.
There's also that one woman standing over the baby carriage too.
Oh yeah.
And I remember as soon as I saw her, I put a bullet right in the back of her head. I was like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't know what's going on with that baby carriage. I'm just going to kill this woman and continue on my way. So maybe that makes
bastard.
I guess I am. But you know what? I felt like there was no good that could come of a woman standing over a baby carriage in the middle of a creepy hallway like that.
Yeah, well, and I also feel that anything involving kids is creepy just by itself.
Oh.
So.
Speaking of, and we could just touch on this very quickly. I saw Sinister the other night.
I saw you didn't love it as much as I do.
Yeah, I enjoyed 2/3 of it. I thought the third act was really weak, but it was okay. Oh, we ended up you know what it is with that movie? I feel like the strength comes in the build-up, and when you finally get to the payoff, it just sucks. I thought the movie was good. Like, I'll probably own it when it comes out on Blu-ray, but I just found it to be like, and this connects to the loneliness. You know, Ethan Hawke's character is very alone in his quest of trying to figure out exactly what the hell happened to this family that was murdered or whatever as a true crime author. And you know, the movie has a lot of like the familiar tropes, like the totally not supportive wife, you know, found in every detective and horror story of obsession that you'll ever find. Only she's British this time around. But the villain was really cool. The ghoul, the demon or whatever. I don't know. I just found that Hawke's story was going one way, and then it took away and it took a different direction and went to a very like, oh, okay, modern horror tropes way. But I 2/3 of the movie are great. So
yeah, I love the pacing and the build up. I like my horror movies and my horror games too, to really give you time to get to know the character before stuff starts going wrong. You know, like that's part of the reason that I don't really get into those torture porn movies or anything, because it's really just like, here's just a bunch of characters to lead to the slaughter. You know, you don't need to know about them. But, you know, this is the reason I liked 1408 so much too, was I felt that they gave John Cusack's character a lot of time to build and get established before bad things started happening to him.
Yeah. And I thought, you know, Sinister did a good job of doing that for the first and second acts. And, you know, when they introduce, what's his face, the guy from Law and Order, Criminal Intent, Vincent D'Onofrio, I thought that was cool too. I thought that was awesome. So often you don't really see in horror movies experts seeking out other experts to help them with stuff. So I really like that. But it just fell a little flat for me towards the end. The audience seemed to dig it. So I liked it. Like I said, I just didn't love it. I expected to love it after hearing you and John talk about it. And like I said, at Chud, it's doing gangbusters. Like, people are loving it there. So yeah. I was really jazzed, but I liked it enough. But it, you know, that touches on the loneliness and aloneness as well, which I liked. So it worked well with the conversation in terms of, like, we had our notes put out, and then I saw this movie and I was like, shit, this is really hitting Patrick's in a big way. Like, I could see Patrick doing this and feeling alone in doing it.
I feel so lonely because I haven't seen that movie right now.
I think you might like it, Patrick. It's good.
Yeah, it's sinister.
But I think,
and of course, we can't talk about aloneness without talking about Kim Jong-il from Team America. No,
I'm Ray.
My favorite thing is still the actual man-sized person that's painted up as a statue in that movie. I thought that was so awesome. But Sinister is a good transition point into the idea of hopelessness. which is my fear. That's my biggest fear, is not ever having hope again. And it's funny because Resident Evil 6, the whole catchphrase apparently is "there's no hope left" or "no hope left" or something like that. But yet at the end of that game, everything's fine again. So it's a little weird. It doesn't really touch on the hopeless aspect. And in terms of and Julian can attest to this because we've known each other a long time. When I was younger, I had there was a lot of hopelessness in me. I didn't feel much like I was accomplishing the things that I wanted to, and I didn't think that I would be able to ever accomplish those things. And some I have, some I haven't. And the main one of those was finding someone and connecting to them and being with them forever, which is what I wanted. And then I met my ex-fiance, spoilers, and that hopelessness kind of went away. I was happy. I wasn't like the happiest person on the planet. We had our problems, hence why she's my ex. But that hopelessness that I felt before meeting her has crept back into my everyday life since she and I have been broken up. And it's probably, and I don't know if it's worse now or if it's just because it's hitting me again and I'm remembering how bad it was before, but it is hitting me and it's really like knocking me down and cutting me off at the knees. And it's difficult getting going again after something like that happens. And it's weird. I don't want to invest the time in spending time with someone again because she and I had a lot of good years together, and I don't want to have those good years with another person. I'm realizing this. I want to have them with her again, and I don't have any hope that that's ever going to happen. So,
but why?
I just think we're in very different places now. She's seeing someone, she's very happy, so I'm not going to fuck that up.
Maybe she's just fronting.
She could just be fronting. But in terms of gaming, I think that Obscure and Obscure the Aftermath do a really good job of addressing hopelessness. And I think to a lesser extent Fallout 3 does a really good job of addressing hopelessness too, because I'll touch on the Fallout one really quick. At the end of Fallout 3, you may have saved the wasteland, but it's still a wasteland, and it's still awful. So you didn't really do a whole lot. You may have purified the water and have saved a few people and maybe have helped a future generation, but there's another mission in Fallout 3 that's probably a little more touching in that you find this like mutant tree, and the tree wants you to kill him because he doesn't want to be alive anymore. And if you do kill him, there's a thing you can do where, you spread his seeds all throughout the wasteland. And he's like, okay, well, if this happens, then, trees will grow again and it'll be the beginning of the healing of the wasteland. And you do it and you never see any of the trees that were supposed to grow. And he said they would grow quick because they were all accelerated or whatever. And you never see them. So it's really frustrating. But that sort of goes with the hopelessness. And then Fallout 3's ending altogether there's some hope, I guess, but not really.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of hopelessness just through pervading gaming because, like, ever since the first days of most, like, MS-DOS or, like, early Windows titles, like, creators have just been making games that have hopelessness built into their engine and, like, their gameplay. Like, if you think way back to Ski Free, I hope you guys have played it. But that was, like, one of my first games, and it would happen, like, every time I would finish all my work in school because we had, like, a few games like Solitaire or whatever, but not as cool as Ski Free. I mean, maybe Oregon Trail. But anyway, the Yeti comes out from the side of the screen and there's nothing you can do about it. It's absolute hopelessness. It's just like he comes up, you've been going down the slopes for as long as you can, getting this high score, and like at one point, like you just have good enough hand-eye coordination where you're not going to fall over any tree or any stone that's going down toward you. But then the Yeti comes out and he just eats you right up after a little while, and it's like, what could I do?
Yeah.
Not murderous psychopath.
This is why I love Patrick, because
Yeah, you could talk more about why you love me. It's okay.
because you will always come up with the most esoteric stuff, like friggin' ski free. I love it. Like,
Oregon Trail, my God. In Viva Pinata, there's a very similar thing. Professor Pester is a character that you can't stop from coming into your garden and just slaughtering your innocent pinatas that you've been raising. So that always frustrated me. You can eventually get a thing that keeps him away for good, but for a long time he just comes in and just kills your things and eats the candy that comes out of their beautiful, beautiful faces. It's awful. But Obscure and Obscure the Aftermath do a really good job in terms of talking about hopelessness.
Viva Pinata is actually like one of the games that I like thought about buying Xbox the most for.
Yeah, dude, Viva Pinata is amazing. The first one and the second one, they're both amazing.
Like I'm more jealous that you have that than you have Halo, to be honest, because Halo, like, there's other games like it, but there's not another game like really like Viva Pinata that I know of on PS3.
It's
that's
true.
a really good point, yeah.
It is a good point. But Obscure basically takes the idea of you're a group of high school kids and you uncover some shady biological goings-ons in your school, and it's basically it's a healthy mix of Scream and the faculty and a lot of other things, but it really takes the idea of the degeneration of a society, and it doesn't talk about it specifically. It transposes it onto the high school, and that the high school looks like it's crumbling and falling apart, and you just kind of see, like, you know, the educational system is coming down and it's really failing these kids in a lot of ways, except for, you know, the smarter kids of the group that you have. You know, there's like the reporter, there's the smarter girl and stuff like that. And each character has something to bring to the table, but if a character dies, they're gone for good and you can't get them back, but the story doesn't stop. And you end up getting a lesser ending. Now, what happens in the second one of the characters from the first game is so messed up from the events of the first game that he kills himself in the opening of Obscure 2, The Aftermath, which was kind of controversial because they've never shown a character commit suicide in that way in gaming before. That wasn't like, oh, I have to do this to save the world or something silly, you know? But, and that's just, I mean, it really nails home the idea that the hopelessness of the narrative, and it's really sad. You know, Silent Hill 2 is very hopeless as well, you know, depending on certain endings that you get, and the Left 4 Dead series evokes a kind of hopelessness. You know, the games are not equated with that kind of horror, but, you know, Left 4 Dead is really the end of the world. Like, it's Valve's version of the end of the world. Maybe that end of the world leads to what Portal is, which is also incredibly, incredibly hopeless as well, even though Shell gets out at the end of Portal 2 and she has her companion cube, but how long is she going to survive on her own, and who knows what's out there? So, it's a lot of hopelessness.
I think Left 4 Dead is a really good one, because I actually feel that zombie fiction in particular, like any zombie fiction, be it books, movies, video games, are always hopeless, because no matter what you do, like, there's very, very few zombie stories that end well. Like, it's always, this is pretty much the end. Like, you know, there's a few pockets of people that are still living here and there, but they're eventually going to die out, and that's going to be it. It's just going to be a dead world. And
I think you know, the one aspect of hope that translates from Left 4 Dead is that the four characters that you end up playing as are in fact immune. I think that's the one tiny glimmer of hope. But I mean, one tank and it's all over. So it's, you know.
Yeah, and they don't exactly have time to, like, go off and make babies. You know, like,
right.
They're just trying to survive, like, day to day.
Yeah, exactly.
So the other thing I was thinking about with hopelessness was, like, what music really changed my perception of, like, a game that I would otherwise have felt, like, pretty positive about. And in Shadow of the Colossus, like we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but in a different way, like, for the final battle, you'd think it would be like something amazing and epic and like big, and it is. Like the scale is like amazing, but the actual song that plays, the demise of the ritual, it's another thing that was harrowing for me in a way. Like I would be running up those like trenches, and it has like these big gongs that are like, and it has like do 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 do, like stuff like that and going on, and it's like this guy's so big, and I just feel hopeless that like this game will never end because I keep falling off the guy, up, and I go all the way back to the bottom, and I have to do the whole like thing again for 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes, and like it's not even my fault this time that I fell off or whatever. He just shook his hand. So like that made me feel hopeless, but also the fact that that game was so cool, and like I didn't want it to end, and it was hopeless because I was gonna defeat that bad guy. So it was hopeless that that game like had to have an ending in a way, and I feel that way about a lot of video games. It's hopeless that there is an end.
And that game's end also doesn't instill very much hope in you. Like it's not a good end.
Nope.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
That's
funny.
one of the darker endings in gaming, I think.
Definitely, yeah. I don't know. It's funny, Patrick, that you said that there's so much hopelessness in games, because when Rob brought this topic up in our show notes leading up to the recording of this, I was having to rack my brain trying to think of games that I felt that with that weren't zombie, because obviously, like any zombie game, like as I already said, that's how I feel. But I feel, and again, Rob, going back to your thing with Obscure and everything, Corpse Party, which I can't say enough good things about. That PSP horror / RPG game. I mean, everything about that feels hopeless, because you were these kids who did some funny little ritual because you thought it was going to be fun and you didn't think anything of it, and they're now trapped in this demon dimension that's a twisted rendition of their school. And basically, when you encounter one of the ghosts of the children that are wandering in the halls, it's ball game over. Like that's it. Like you see them and you die, and they die in many horrible ways. There's lots of suicide and just like freaking out and falling down, pits and stuff like that. It's a very graphic game for something so simple, with just like little 2D hand drawn sprites. But and again, like going back to sound, like the sound effects and the soundtrack in that game really add to that sense of not only hopelessness but being alone. Like you will have certain parts where you have like 2 or 3 people with you, but even then you still feel like you're just by yourself. And that game evokes a lot of emotion, considering again that it's just this little bitty PSP game that, by all intents and purposes, like just when you look at it, looks like it wouldn't affect you emotionally at all. But the game that I think really describes this perfectly is Final Fantasy VI. I'd never really seen anything like this before, and there's really a few games that do this, but the bad guy wins in Final Fantasy VI. You get to that midpoint in the game, and Kefka destroys the world. And after that, your characters have given up. Like, they're just like, we can't do it. Like, he won. This is the way the world is now. You're controlling Celis for the beginning part of that area, and if you don't save Cid from sickness, then he dies, and she tries to kill herself. And when you're in the overworld, it's this just depressing funeral dirge that plays for the overworld music. And you're trying to get the band back together, so to speak, but they're not in good places emotionally by the time you find them. And the whole thing just feels like, I'm not going to be able to do this. Like, this is the end of the world. This is it. Like, all we can do is try to get back together and try one last push, but I don't really feel that it's going to do any good. And that was a very powerful thing for me that sticks with me to this day. So, yeah. Final Fantasy VI, World of Ruin.
Every single time I almost start to play that game, I hear like spoilers, and it makes me like have to not play it for a couple months so I can forget about it.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what, Patrick? Even with spoilers, like it's still highly worth playing. I mean, I know that game backwards and forwards, but it's still just as enjoyable to me now as it was when I popped it in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
That's always the one thing you hear about that game too, Patrick. Is like, yep, Kefka destroys the world. Like it's it's like that's like the main interested. Well, that's not the main thing. The whole game is awesome, but that's like one of the more interesting parts of it is that the villain kind of wins at one point.
Yeah,
like,
and you got to play that game just for the villain. I mean, he's like the Joker of the video game universe.
Love it. At one time, I just watched this video of him laughing, and I thought like there was something more to it because this guy posted it on Kotaku. He was like, "This is the scariest thing I've ever seen," and it was just Kepka laughing with like a bunch of like crazy psychedelic stuff going on in the background. You probably know this part in the game, but like it was just looped over and over for 10 minutes, and I didn't do anything. I just kept looking at it. What's gonna? Nothing.
Kefka's laugh is pretty terrifying, though. So hearing it looped would be pretty effective.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're kind of dancing around the one elephant that we always have, too, in terms of hopelessness in pretty much every show, and it's Mass Effect 3. Pretty hopeless towards the end of that one. And, seeing London completely annihilated by the end of that game is, you kind of get a feeling like, okay, well, we may have done this whole 30-plus hour mission, but these things are fucking us up still. So what is it going to take to stop these things? And I think that's a reason why a lot of people aren't playing Leviathan as much as they maybe should. I haven't played it. I haven't heard much about it. But I think it's just the general lack of care that there's just no hope towards the end of Mass Effect 3, other than, the endings, the nice little codas that they tack on. But other than that, it's just like, he's still, it's things are not going to happen. He's not going to make it. So, sort of the ultimate form of hopelessness in that way.
I guess I felt more hopeful leading into Mass Effect 3, even towards the end. I didn't get the sense of it that I got, like, the third Matrix movie, like, when they finally show, like, the real world where the machines live, and I was just like, there's no way that humanity would ever have won this war. Like, there are just way too many of these things for people to fight, and this is just going to end badly. I don't really feel that I ever felt that way in Mass Effect, and I think part of that is that, and this is a complaint I've had about the whole series, is that I think that they have a problem showing scale. You never really get because things like the Citadel is a massive structure, but you explore such small portions of it that it's really hard to see within the framework of the game just how big that is. And I don't feel that you ever see enough of the Reapers laying waste in the course of the game to really get that sense of, it's all on the line. And it's been a while since I played it, so I might be forgetting some stuff.
I think closing in on the end and, Shepard basically using the Deus Ex Machina to take everything down I think that's more of the no hope aspect. It's like, oh, there was no real logical way that we could stop the Reapers, but let's have this happen. But I guess, in the ending that I pride the most, it is very hopeful because he does, make it. So I guess there is hope, but going into it, I was like, there's no way. It's like, there's no way. It took so much effort to take that one down. It's just like, no matter what I do with this super weapon, it's still going to be a huge fight. So, I don't know. I think I would have just left. I think I would have just got on the Normandy with my girl and gone. I don't know.
Coward.
It's not so much cowardice. She's just so hot. She's so hot. I would have done enough. If I was Shepard, I would have fought through 70-plus hours of game to get everybody to that point and just be like, now it's your turn. Everybody else do their business. But I think overall we really touched on a lot of good, palpable fears and solid, palpable horror. And for my money, Halloween is the perfect time to talk about horror and to talk about things of a scary nature. Even though going back to the beginnings of America, a lot of people told ghost stories at at Christmas time, especially here in New York and the New England, the area. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, for example, is a story that was told around Christmas time, and that's just part of it. So horror can come in a lot of different ways. Horror can come in a lot of different forms. And going back to the point I touched on earlier, the idea of the other, and like what we're afraid of ourselves, we are the other. You know, what scares Julian is a very internal fear, but it's an internal fear that other people certainly feel. Patrick's fear of, you know, loneliness and being alone is something that everybody can certainly relate to. And having no hope is certainly something that others can relate to as well. So really, you know, we're not scared of some creepy monster in the dark. We're scared of being in the dark ourselves in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'm sure as hell not scared for anyone else.
Yeah, it's, I'm not too worried. But, you know, there's a lot of things that you could talk about in terms of, you know, what scares you. And it would be nice to, you know, see some comments on the show, what scares some other people, what terrifies other people, what are some scary things in games. And, you know, there are a lot of different, I think the important thing also in terms of gaming is that there are a lot of games that touch on a variety of fears. You know, we have Julian's underwater stuff. We have Patrick's, you know, being alone in the dark kind of stuff, almost literally with Alone in the Dark. But, you know, we have the hopelessness stuff. So there's something for everyone. You know, survival horror, true horror, first person, that sort of thing. So there's something for everybody, and, you know, you owe it to yourself either on Halloween or as we get closer to Halloween to maybe give something a go. Go through a haunted house, you know, do something, you know, fun with friends, get scared, go see a scary movie. Probably not Paranormal Activity 4 because it sounds awful. Go see Sinister. You like Paranormal Activity 4?
Yeah. I liked it better than the third one, but the second one is still my favorite.
Okay. I'll have to
There's
see
no
the
Argo.
fourth one then. Yeah, I'm sure.
But pro tip, if you're going to go see a scary movie, people don't want to hear your snarky, humorous comments that you're using to try to alleviate the terror for yourself. We don't want to hear it. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you're going to do that, if you can't handle being scared and you have to, like, nervously, like, talk during the movie, stay home.
Yeah.
Because I even went to the draft house to see Paranormal Activity 4 after having back-to-back issues with 2 and 3 with audiences, and there were still people talking. And that's a theater that's known for people not talking during movies. So if you can't handle it, stay home.
Stay home, San Diego.
That's a problem there? People do that?
I've only experienced it with horror movies, and I feel that it's some sort of defense mechanism where people are scared, and so in an attempt to alleviate their being scared, they make jokes or they
laugh or something like that, so they make it not scary. They take away
or even talk at the screen. Like, I can understand, because, you know, there's a lot of humor in Paranormal Activity 4. The girl's boyfriend is actually pretty funny. But I'm talking about actually talking to the screen and stuff like that. Like, just keep it internalized. You know.
We when we saw Sinister, I was making we were kind of making comments to one another as we went along. You know, obviously whisper. I would never in a million fucking years say, like, ha ha ha, that's funny, even though I did say toasty when I was a little kid and saw Mortal Kombat. But yeah, we weren't like, haha, isn't it funny that he's hiding in the bushes and then his son has long hair like a girl? Haha, that's funny. Like, we weren't anything like that. I was just like, I remember one thing I said to my friend Lindsay who went, I was like, you would think at some point he would stop going up into the attic.
See, no, I can't do that. Like, when I'm at the movies, it's quiet time. Like, my former girlfriend Gina, we would go to the movies, and she likes to ask questions during movies, and she'd be like, you know, what's this? I'm like, shh.
Yeah,
and she would just like look at me. I'm like, no, we're not going to do this here. Like, we're watching the movie. We will talk after the movie.
My friend Mary does that bullshit where she talks to the movie, and I'm like, you really need to stop right now. Like, that needs to stop. You're not in the movie. You're not having a conversation with Paul Giamatti right now. You need to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, you don't talk when you bring someone out on a date. You talk when you bring them home. You know, buy DVD or Blu-ray.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we're watching a movie at home, that's one thing. But I'm still like, hey, you know, instead of asking me what's going to happen, let's just let it unfold naturally.
Yeah. I can't understand that sort of thing, and I think that goes back to what you're saying about, being scared in a movie theater and trying to alleviate the tension kind of thing. But I don't read a lot of horror novels. I don't read a lot of horror in terms of the written word.
Oh, I used to.
I don't know. Like, I've never read a Stephen King book, though I have a few. I've read On Writing. That's the only book of his I've ever read.
I've got like 20 of them. I read a lot of them. That's actually, I was more scared of like horror books when I was little than I was of like horror games because I had a decent imagination. I'm not going to toot my horn that much, but
Yeah.
The Shining was particularly scary for me. So was Dreamcatcher.
Yeah, Dreamcatcher's great. The movie, I mean. I've only seen
Dude, the
But,
book is so much more scary and involved. It's like 1,000 pages. This is like the biggest book I ever read at the time.
Yeah. I read a lot of, like, true horror type stuff. I like to read a lot about, like, I'm looking at my bookshelf here to see if I have the book somewhere, but I don't see it. I read this amazing book that was about a woman, and I actually got it at Washington Irving's estate. Washington Irving, of course, is the guy who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
I was there too, yeah.
Oh, you went there?
Uh-huh.
Oh, man, Sunnyside? Yeah, I love that place. It's probably my favorite place on the planet. I proposed to my ex-fiancée for the second time there.
That's
And, yeah, it's a beautiful spot. And then I killed myself. But,
Twist. We were talking to a ghost the whole podcast.
all was coming from inside the house. I read this amazing book that was this woman who had some psychic inclinations or whatever, and another guy who was very science and fact-based, and he was actually a skeptic. The two of them went out and did some ghost investigations and that kind of thing. And some of them were really dark and really interesting, but a lot of them were more about the, some things would be written from his perspective, and then other parts of the chapter would be written from her perspective. So it was really cool to see both things. And I think there's a movie coming out by James Wan, the guy who did the Saw movies, and he did Insidious, which is amazing. But it's got Patrick Wilson and the chick from The Departed, whose name I never remember, as husband and wife ghost hunters. And it's a very similar story to the book I was just talking about that I wish I could remember the name of. But yeah, I like that kind of stuff. When I'm reading horror, I guess. But I do have plenty of horror books that are calling my name. Ghost Road Blues, for example, by Jonathan Mayberry. So, too many books, too many goddamn books.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, you can't talk about literary horror without talking about Lovecraft, who, he addressed a lot of the kind of fears that we have in literature before anybody else really did. So, I think we dedicate the podcast to H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, love it.
To
Also, like, when I was as long as we're talking about books now, when I was in, like, 7th grade, we had to do, like, an oral retelling of a story, and I chose The Body Snatcher by Robert Louis Stevenson, which I would say is, like, a classic horror story. Anyway, that was awesome.
That is awesome.
I also haven't read very many horror books, but ones that, they're not really horror, but as far as creepy and just warm, fuzzy memories, are the Bunnicula books. I read those in like elementary school, and I would revisit them over and over and over. So I think they still hold up. I haven't read them in years, but read Holiday Inn. Good stuff.
I read this amazing book when I was a little kid that was about, and I've been trying to find it ever since, and I cannot for the life of me find it. So if any listeners know this book, please, for the love of God, get in touch with me somehow and tell me what the name is. It's about these 3 kids who somehow end up fighting a zombie throughout their entire town. It's just one zombie. And it's just some creepy old man that somehow wakes up, and they end up blowing a hole through his chest with a cannonball at the Historical Society. And it was really an amazing, amazing horror story for kids that really, it didn't go to very many dark places, but it was dark enough. And for the life of me, I cannot remember the name of it. I can't find my copy of it anywhere. The cover had the zombie reaching out with his hands. He had a white beard and white hair and the 3 kids. Oh, it was awesome. It was such a good book. But, R.L. Stine. Talk about R.L. Stine. We all read Goosebumps growing up. So
I didn't read them. I just
did.
for the cover.
You didn't read Goosebumps, Julian?
No, I was a little older, so
Yeah.
when those started coming out, I was beyond
Fear
that.
Street. You should have been reading Fear Street then.
What?
Fear Street is for older kids. Was for the older kids. His horror.
I was reading Star Wars books.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
that's cool. But yeah, in closing, I think that horror comes in a lot of forms, and you owe it to yourself, especially this time of year, to indulge. So go to a haunted house, play a scary video game, watch a scary movie, drink some apple cider, carve a fucking pumpkin, make a cool jack-o'-lantern, do what you gotta do. I'm gonna make a jack-o'-lantern probably this weekend. And, so do it. Do all these fun Halloween-y things. Go on a hayride. Do all this good stuff. It's good.
Oh, I love haunted hayrides. Those were way easier for me to do than like going in a haunted house because I used to get so claustrophobic.
Yeah. Claustrophobia is a definite fear. But yeah, so...
Oh, and also, go to Sonic and get 50-cent corn dogs, because that's what I'll be doing on Halloween.
That's a sad thing.
Just going to put that out there.
Hey, so do you guys have like one recommendation that like people might not know that they should like indulge in over
Yes.
this holiday?
Yes, that's an excellent idea. Download for free and play Slender on your PC.
Oh, dude, Slender Man on iOS devices is actually like one of the top 5 video games right now.
Oh,
Like,
really?
Yeah, it's crazy. So
That's awesome. Yeah, deservedly so. It's a great game.
yeah, ever since you've been hyping it, it started to sell more.
I have power. Julian, you have one? You have a
Well, I mentioned earlier, but I say that if you have a PSP or a PlayStation Vita, go get Corpse Party. Do it. It's really excellent. And then find the soundtrack and give it to me because I can't find it. It's really good.
Oh, man. Patrick, what do you have for our wonderful listeners?
Yeah, I actually didn't think of anything. I just thought of the question. But,
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
I'm going to try Amnesia the Dark Descent. I've had it for a while, so I'm saying, why don't you try it with me? I heard it has one of the scariest baddies in all of Bad E.
Yeah, I just sit down and play it. I own it, but I still haven't played it.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Really? Okay. I heard it's like one of the scariest games ever, like those...
They're scarier.
Whatever.
No, it's a good game. It really is, and it looks beautiful. It's just Slender is free, and Slender is a way better game. It's a way better game. And I think you would like Slender a lot more than Amnesia. But
Yeah, actually, Slender, I'm interested in the Slender Man because of, in a weird way, Radiohead. Have you guys heard of the new CD King of Limbs?
yeah.
Well, apparently, if you look at a lot of theory, there's always theory about Radiohead CDs and stuff like that. But the theory for this one is the King of Limbs is actually Slender Man, and if you look deep into it on the internet, you'll sort of get freaked out with Tom York and everything that he put in, all the thought that he put into this one allegedly. And anyway, I'll leave it at that, and you can do your own discovery. But Slender Man creeps me out, and I haven't even played the game yet.
So yeah, play some good games, go to a haunted house, and indulge in some horror this Halloween. So I think that about wraps everything up here on episode 10, Nerds Without Pants Halloween Havoc, which is an old WCW pay-per-view name, which is the coolest WCW pay-per-view, other than Starrcade. But
I'm gonna have to find some old WCW Halloween Havoc promo art, aren't I? For this podcast.
Do you remember in the TNT logo used to have the TNT in the mouth of a jack-o'-lantern?
Yeah.
For WCW. It was awesome. I love WCW.
If that's what you took out of this podcast.
Everybody, the most important thing is that we all miss the WCW. But yeah, just have fun this Halloween and be safe. If you want to go trick-or-treating, do it. Go and get some candy. Candy's the best thing ever. And play some games, and that's that. So on
Candy.
Candy's delicious. Nerds
That
Without
was a
Pants.
Hunger Force reference.
I want candy, bubblegum or taffy.
Yeah.
My favorite part is when he says, I'm the Hume Cronin, she's my Jessica Tandy, I want candy. So, on behalf of Julian and Patrick, we have our Twitters that you should go to. So, Julian.
Ooh.
You can find me on Twitter at Julian_Titus.
Patrick, where can the folks find you at the Twitter?
Somehow I'm still at some boss. I haven't been fired yet.
And he's tweeting a little more, people, so encourage him, because now that he has an iPhone, he has no excuse.
It's hilarious. That's exactly why I've been tweeting more.
And you can find me at Robert Ottone, Ottone. You can find Julian and Patrick's work at pixelbit.com. You can find my work at chud.com, justpressplay.net, and my article series on online dating at thingswomenwant.com. But that about wraps everything up. So enjoy Halloween, have a happy and safe one, and stay scared, America. Stay scared, and the world. Stay scared.
Resident Evil. It's episode 10, by the way.
Yes. What's the 10th anniversary gift? What is that, paper? Let me see. 10-year anniversary gift. I'm pretty sure it's paper.
Is it skyrocketing popularity?
That would be nice.